Well, folks, can you spot the difference on this somewhat factory Bergara B14r in carbon fiber? Yes, it is the original carbon fiber barrel, 18-inch, and I did install this barreled action into an HNT26 chassis from MDT. Now, in previous video, I ended up rebarreling a Bergara and put a tuner on it and got that thing to shoot super accurate. But I thought to myself, what can we do with a factory Bergara B14r with some of the mods that I've shown with minimal costs, reusing the same parts yet doing a lot of upgrades? You guys stick around, you'll like this one. So folks, if you pay attention to how I manipulate the bolt of this rifle, you'll notice that this B14R is extremely smooth compared to some of the other ones out there. And folks that actually own B14Rs know what I'm talking about. There's kind of a double hang up on manipulating the bolt, and it makes it super cumbersome to actually lock down the bolt onto the action. So in a previous video, I showed how I reprofiled that cocking ramp right there, and I made it so this thing does feel a lot smoother when engaging or locking down the bolt handle. One of the things that I did is once I removed the roll pin, I was able to basically turn on centers on both sides here, and then basically cut the back side of the locking lugs square. So I did measure the inside run out of this thing and the bolt body run out. It was within 1/10 thou, which is pretty amazing, and I was able to, like I said, square it up. Now I did put die cam on this this receiver and found that only one side of the lug was basically engaging. So I went ahead and used valve grinding compound, and I went ahead and lapped the bolt lug into the receiver lugs themselves after all this was squared up. So some of the other mods that I did, now this Bergara B14, if you're unaware, it's a different kind of firing pin assembly. What it is this firing pin spring acts like a hammer, which will go ahead and hit this. The hammer will hit this, the firing pin assembly, and then that in turn sits on top of this thing, which is your firing pin itself. And then the bottom tip of that firing pin is a return spring. So if you guys notice, if you guys ever took apart a Bergara, these things are actually pretty rough. So another thing that I did was ended up chucking this up on my drill, and went ahead and used my it was a knife polishing tool, and actually gave this thing a nice 1000 grit polish. What I ended up finding out was this actual firing pin itself was actually dragging a little bit inside this assembly here. Now on the bolt, I ended up getting a file and putting a kind of a 30-degree or about 45-degree bevel on the actual lugs. Now I've done this because what it does, it actually gives you a little bit more leverage when locking the bolt down, and actually smoothens out the bolt. Now if we take a look at basically like a Rimex bolt, you'll see that they do that from the factory as well. As shown here on both sides of these lugs. Also on the Voodoo bolt, here's another example. The Voodoo has the exact same thing. And this is a V22 90-degree angle or 90-degree bolt, and you can see there that they also do have a bevel on their locking lugs. Now why Bergara doesn't do that is totally above me. I don't see a disadvantage of why they don't do that, so I implemented it. With the bolt mods done, after reprofiling the locking lugs and the cocking ramp, I can manipulate this bolt with one finger. Now, it isn't as smooth as a Voodoo or a Rimex. There's still a little bit of a hang up right there. However, there is more mechanical advantage. And like I said, you can manipulate this now with one finger. Now, instead of the original basically Bergara B14R where it locked up right about there, this one now locks up and hangs up right about mid-stroke, which gives you more of a mechanical advantage, thus making this thing a hell of a lot smoother. As far as the action goes, we ended up squaring up the front receiver face and removing the hood using the Cretan Rifles action jig. Now we're using a precision ground PTG recoil lug at 300 thousandths thickness, and I got a max tenon length of 1 inch 703 thousandths and a bolt face tenon length of 1 inch 738 thousandths, which gives us roughly 35 thousandths of headspace, which is pretty tight. So I added another 5 thousandths for headspace to give me roughly 42 thou, and I got a max tenon length of 1.695. Now as far as the factory barrel, I did indicate this thing with the range rod at first to get it running true on the bore access, and then went ahead and indicated on the lands and grooves, and ended up finding out that the chamber was cut a little bit crooked. I then of course fixed this by getting this thing to run true using my 4-jaw chuck, and I indicated the actual lands and grooves where the bullet enters the actual bore right about 1/10 thou, if not less. Now, to achieve my desired tenon length of 1 inch 698 thou, I had to remove quite a bit of material off the shoulder and then retime the barrel because of the extractor relief cuts. This required me to actually face off the breech face of the barrel, and then in turn I have to rechamber. So pretty much the only time that I saved on this was pretty much cutting the metric threads on the actual tenon. So having to rechamber this thing, I ended up putting it on a solid chamber reamer holder. That way I could cut the chamber straight, and it is a JGS match chamber that I'm putting in this thing now. Now this chamber does favor the SK and Lapua ammo, but it will shoot the Ely ammo pretty decent, so I'm having this thing set with a jam point of 123 thousandths with the Ely EPS style bullet. Alright, gonna bore cam this thing, see what it looks like here. Just polished up the chamber. Looking good. See how good this chamber's cut. Looks pretty friggin' straight. Yep, looking good. So this carbon fiber barrel, which I forgot to say, is stainless steel. And now that I have it chambered up, I ended up having to retouch up the actual extractor relief cuts using my jig. Okay, to ensure our headspace is correct, here is a no-go gauge we're going to try first from Dave Manson. Now, these are set at 51 thou. So let me put this in the chamber here. And this should not lock down. So right there is hanging up, and it ain't going any further, even with tension. So that's good. And of course, the go gauge, which is 45 thou, or 41 I believe. This one's 41. That one locks down easily. So this thing is definitely headspace correctly. Have it at right at 45 thou. So I think we're going to be golden with this rifle. Now with the testing, I've had some really impressive groups. Now all of these groups were shot at 100 yards, and these performed very well with the Ely 10X, but I even got a better result using SK Standard Plus as well as SK Rifle Match. The last 3 groups of 5 shots, we're using SK ammo. This was SK Standard Plus, SK Standard Plus, SK Rifle Match. So I think the combination of the barrel length being 18 inches and that chamber, that JGS Match chamber, is definitely making this thing shoot phenomenal, especially that little bug hole group right there. Now this is all Ely 10X on different lots, and you can see that it is not as tight as the SK ammo. So pretty happy that it's shooting the cheaper stuff, especially the SK Standard, and I'll be able to take this out to competition now. I got this thing zeroed out, was aiming at the tip of the diamonds here, so pretty happy with this group, and pretty happy overall using the factory barrel and basically rechambering this thing and squaring up the action. So here's the results. Let me know what you guys think, comment below, and thanks for watching.